Well, we appreciate NIAA coming. We hope that you've enjoyed the last 3 days, and we're going to finish up here with a couple of activities. But I want to kind of echo what Steve said, and I think as we reflect on the last 3 days, there's a lot that we can learn and think about. And so, you know, as we look at that video that Dr. Brooks shared, and without getting into the details of it, I think we can see a lot of examples of how actually there was good communication efforts. Now, their goal was different than that of many of us in the rooms, but there was good communication efforts. The demonstration of bacteria that looked particular ways. The video game is a mechanism that Dr. Dahlstrom talked to us about, you know, kind of putting into it a sense that people understand, and you know, that appealing to people's understanding. And so the challenge for us is we've talked about the complexity of the AMR issue, but I think we've got so much complexity of the communications, and we need to take that home with us, because each item that is developed for communication is unique to a goal. And we have to keep that in mind. When we work with our partners at CDC, Dawn and Megan, I'm not sure if Megan's still here, she went on home, and we want to work with them and they want to work with us. But they work in an agency that has a goal. It's public health, right? So right off the bat, their goal is to influence change towards public health. We have to work with them to think about how do we get our message in there, but we can't change their message from influencing change in public health. And so trying to downplay and say antibiotic resistance is not a problem isn't going to work. And sometimes those individual messages within that aren't going to work. And so our challenge is, how do we do that on the scale? And every video that we produce, any organization produce, has a goal, has an audience, and when we look at those, if we don't share those goals or that same audience, we're going to have concerns about how it's done, and that creates this continued development of complexity. And from a research perspective, it gets more and more complex for Dr. Brooks, because we want to ask questions about each of those unique areas. And, you know, this is what I'm most interested in. So let's do our research there. But I think this is the challenge for us as we communicate in the One Health spectrum, is, as Dr. Brooks pointed out to us, each of us in that One Health spectrum have different values and different perspectives that we bring to the table. And certainly it's hopefully all health, but in some cases we're trying to purposely persuade or push towards action. In other cases we're trying to promote knowledge. And in other cases it's trying to persuade away from individuals doing particular practices. And so I continue, and one of the first things I saw Michael Dahlstrom present here on campus was the raw milk issue. And you know, a lot of my research background's in Campylobacter. I grew up drinking raw milk. I don't feed raw milk to my kids, but I deal with a lot of Campylobacter associated raw milk outbreaks. And so when he presented that, and he, you know, went through that whole values-based perspective of, well, here's, you know, Paul, they're not arguing over your data. You keep pointing data to them, and they're not arguing over your data. They're telling you that they just don't care what the data says. They want the choice to drink raw milk. And it's not different from buckling our seatbelts or any of those other things, that smoking cigarettes that we know are not good, but that we as individuals sometimes decide to do. And so how do we really understand those underlying values and address that in our communication? And concurrently, how do we help those that don't share our values and communicate to other people's values? You know, how do we deal with those messages? And I think that's a big challenge for us. So certainly, as we talked, one of the things that we really want to do is try and not have this be the end of the discussion. And I think we've got plenty of fodder for continued discussion in future periods. But one of the items that we'd like to do is some of my team's going to pass around some papers here. And there's a couple of questions on here that we'd like you to look at. And so the first one is we'd like you to list 3 key take-homes from this conference that you want to remember next time you're trying to communicate with your stakeholders. And if you'd be willing to write those down, we'd really like that. You're going to get to keep this, so this is... Secondly, we'd like you to think about what actions you can take to help you put this, what we discussed at this conference, into practice. So what are the take-homes, and then what specific actions can you take in your task that you do, your job or whatever, that you can take to put this into practice? A third question is, would you be interested in doing a more in-depth communications workshop where you had the opportunity to perhaps practice some of this? We're trying to decide through NIAMRRE if this is an area that there's need. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but would there be interest in smaller group activities where we brought in actors and we actually had people communicate with people that didn't share their values and gave feedback on this is how you could have done that better or something. And then after you write those down, if you're willing, this is the optional component. I'd love for you to take a picture of that and email it. My address is on there. And what we're going to do here is potentially in the next couple of times over the next year is send you back this list of things that you said you wanted to do. And send you back that picture and just pop it back up on your radar and ask you, have you been able to do this? Has anything you learned here impacted how you communicated with others? And along with that, I'd love for you to take this home and put this on your desk or on your door or somewhere, because these are the types of things that continuously throughout our jobs, every day, we're faced with these communication opportunities. And just having these up front and reminding us to take those next steps and what did we learn and how can we put that into practice, that's what we want. That's what NIAA wants. That's what NIAMRRE we want, is not just that we went through Dr. Dahlstrom's talk and all of the great things that we've had over the last 3 days, the science, Dr. Dorman's talks, Dr. Brooks, what we've learned from that, aside from I understand the concern about the video, but what did we learn through that process? The big thing we learned there is people that don't know much about AMR don't want to know more about AMR, and that really influences how we communicate. I think often have this feeling that if they don't know about AMR, they're knocking down the door to hear what we have to say about it, and that's not what we see. We see that they're trying to avoid that. So, and then the final question, if you'd like some follow-up from NIAMRRE and information on our future opportunities, certainly we'll keep NIAA informed as well, but you can circle that. So if you take, I know you're working on that here a couple of minutes, I'm going to give you about 2 or 3 more minutes, and then what I'd like to do is have you discuss those within your table. And if you're not catching on, what I'm trying to do here is we know in prescribing practices, if we make commitments, if physicians make commitments to do things, they're more likely to do them. And so we're hoping that within your table, in these discussions and having you share some of these with us, that those will, when you go home, this will influence and change how you do what you do every day and how you communicate. So here in just a couple minutes, or whenever the group at your tables got those, if you take just, I'm probably going to do 5 minutes, 10 minutes to talk through some stuff here, and then I'll come back up, and I don't know, Eric may have some more comments, may get done a little bit here in advance, and I may have some additional closing comments, but I'd like you to talk about these. What did you learn? What do you think you can take home? How can you change what you do on a daily basis based on what we talked about here today? So take a few minutes, and then we'll gather back up. So I think we'll pull back together here a few minutes. And So I'm interested in taking just a couple of minutes and seeing if any of your tables or individuals would have things that they would be willing to share. Examples of either a big take-home or what is something actionable that you can do. And so I'm going to call out one of my table members. Would you mind commenting on the calendar thing, Marissa?
Oh. He shared. I find that if I have a goal and I don't put it on my calendar, it doesn't get done. So I decided to set aside some time each week at work to reflect on my communication strategy, whether it's for a presentation or to fellow colleagues, just to actively process and work through some of those things that we were given in the communication section.
So other things that folks would be willing to share or ideas? Come on, I know you wrote it down and you shared it with your table. Here.
Battery must be dead. Okay. First of all, I want to make a comment here. This is an economist that writes everything in red ink. Let me just let's preface that as his value system first.
Feel so loved. No judgment here. No, I was just really struck by just being transparent on what we do and do not know and effectively communicating that. And it's okay if things are complex and to kind of say what are the gaps that we don't know and don't make the leap for them. Those are kind of the big things, is communicating that to them.
Others? Dawn committed yesterday to go work on her website, but now maybe she's got another.
Well, I just want to say thank you. I appreciate the NIAA Symposium every year, and every year that I'm here, I learn more and gather more helpful feedback to help us be better at how we work with partners and how we communicate and collaborate. So I am taking a lot back with me from all the discussions we've had in these past 3 days. And it is still about communication and information sharing. So yes, with the website, with the infographics, even more so than when I came into this with the idea that we were going to be making changes and improvements, I have more ideas about how better to do that and make it more clear. Make our images and our infographics more One Health connected, as I've heard the request, to know that there might be pieces and parts, but they all connect back to One Health across the One Health spectrum. And then, again, relaying that with links so that people can always go back and easily find the rest of the pieces that connect that puzzle. So even if we have to separate things, being very clear about that connector back. So we'll continue to strive for that.
So I was just, it's on? No. It says it's on. Just and I think this is for everyday life, but, okay, just for everyday life, but to listen to the people you're talking to better, listen first, and acknowledge that they do have an opinion. Because I think so many times when we hear something and we may have what we feel is the right answer, we start to lecture, but that leads to having a conversation with them. So, listen to them, acknowledge them, that they have an opinion, maybe probe, ask why do you feel that way, and then have a conversation about it, not a lecture.
Any other comments? All right. Well, just a couple of final things, and I think that's an excellent point to end on. That if nothing else, hopefully we can leave here with the understanding and the idea that we need to be sometimes better listeners before we jump to talking, and sometimes we need to think through. I was struck by one of Eric's comments, and maybe this is just because I've never been a salesman, but Eric made the comment after Michael's talk that a lot of that stuff that perhaps salesmen use every day, and that's why you're good at being salesmen. And so, but that's not a lot of what Michael talked about. Some of it's intuitive, but some of it for those of the rest of us we never learned, either by the school of hard knocks or because of our lack of training in media communications, talking to individuals. And so hopefully everybody picked up something that they can take home, and that's on your list here of 3 things. And again, if you'd be willing, take a picture of that, email it to me. I hope my email's blowing up, but you don't have to if you don't want to. But certainly take that home and post that and think about it. And we'd love NIAA. I'm sure would love to get feedback. I believe people will be getting a survey.
Survey will come out right after the meeting. That's correct.
Survey for feedback, but knowing how we can help to further this discussion of communication and practical steps with that would be helpful. So thank you for coming to Ames. We hope you've enjoyed your time here. It's fall. It's not too cold yet. And so Katie says it's cold. You better leave quickly because it's going to get worse. But I'm turning it back over to Eric.
Thank you, Paul. Again, let's give Paul a round of applause and his team.